Well, I hold my breath when I'm scrolling too. So it's like the real double whammy.
Yeah, it's like short form erotic asphyxiation.
I forced myself to meditate this morning, actually, which was good. But it's crazy how quickly your phone ends up in your hand before you even realize it. Like I was meditating kind of for the first few minutes, and then all of a sudden I was looking at my phone and I was like, when did that even fucking happen? When did I stop meditating, pick up my phone and look at Instagram? Like I worked to it. I think it's dissociating. Isn't that dissociation? You're just like, I don't know, I can't be here, scroll. And I'm not really here either. I'm somewhere. I'm neither here nor there. Somewhere disassociated in between.
Everything's a false summit. Once you don't trust influencers anymore, don't want the new probiotic, once you don't want the new whatever subscription for fucking socks or whatever the fuck it is, once we've gotten over this false summit, what are all the things we have gotten over and dispensed with? Is it consumerism in general? Is it advertisement and marketing in general? Maybe even a nosedive into nothingness? It might not be the worst thing for humanity. It's going to truly be able to predict your behavior, know you better than anyone else knows you. Know you better than anyone else can know you. And that's a tremendous amount of power because on some level, is that you? Is that you right there? And you're going to want that like on more than lock and key because your sovereignty as a human being is that no one can take me. I have me. I can take this life. I can live this life. I can maximize this life. I can minimize this life. But the one thing I have agency over is me. And then you're going to be putting this into this, into the cloud or into this storage to be acted upon through a model. And you're going to want that to be controlled. You're going to want to own that. And you're going to want to secure that. Can you imagine how helpful and transformative it would have been for me to be able to have that robot in that moment that was like, dude, that was fucked. That guy's going to be in jail in like 9 years. So joke's on him, right?
Yeah. Or your robot pants is the other kid, which gets into probably some international problems.
Artificial Superintelligence, ASI. This thing is so smart that what it's giving you is the aggregate answer that you would get if you asked all 8 billion people alive today the same question, right?
Sure.
And isn't that, how far from talking to God is that?
Actually, we're just inside of a giant's butthole, because I actually know the fact, like I can see. And then maybe it's like, okay, now I'm going to create my own little universe because I'm sick of you guys. And then it does. And then it has like little us's and we're inside. And that's like the simulation theory, right? We're all just levels, layers and layers and layers down. Fair. Mic drop. It'd have to be like a design win-win systems instead of give and take. Interesting. Okay, man, we did it today. I think we saved the world. We figured out most of the problems with society.
How's it going?
Fine. I'm fine.
Yeah?
Just living the dream. I went camping.
Yeah, really? Is part of living the dream not getting haircuts?
What do you mean? We're just going to see how far we can push this bad boy.
Yeah, that hair will slick back real nice.
It slicks back, and it's always a mullet. No matter how long it gets, it always stays mullet, which is interesting.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing. We're going to see. We're going to see what happens.
Great. That's great. As you know, I spent long swaths of my life with very long hair, and I don't think I'm ever going to do it again.
Yeah.
I like it.
I mean, I would say the never getting haircuts is convenient. And I remember you with long hair. When I met you, you had long hair, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know, because every time I would get a haircut, I'd be like, I fucking hate this haircut. I hate what they've done to me.
I know. You know what I did? I found a great Dominican barber that really puts like an insane amount of menthol and Noxzema on my face and way too hot of towels and, uses a straight razor. And it's like a religious experience / it's like I'm forced to not touch my phone or do anything or talk about anything.
Yeah.
And, he and I catch up for about 5 minutes at the beginning, 5 minutes at the end. And the other 40 minutes, I'm just kind of letting things happen and let my mind wander. And I hate to say it, but it's the only time my mind's allowed to wander in a month because I just have too much access to prevent that from happening.
I feel you, man. I just saw one of those headlines that you see on Instagram that you don't dive any deeper into, but it said that watching short videos is worse for your brain than drinking alcohol. Like the little and I don't know how you make that comparison, but those little short, we're all just like short clip. Maybe it's the dopamine, it's like you're training zero attention.
Yeah. And it's just like quick. Yeah. I guess it's just the the dumps of it, or the frequency of it, or the amount of it that your brain has to deal with that it just wouldn't normally deal with. I mean, I would think that it doesn't exactly make sense, because to me, because part of the reason that alcohol is bad for your brain is that it deprives oxygen to your brain, and I can't imagine that too much of a chemical that your brain already creates, or that glands adjacent to your brain already create, can be worse for you than starving your brain of oxygen. But if that's true, that's terrifying.
Well, I hold my breath when I'm scrolling too, so it's like it's a real double whammy.
Yeah, it's like it's short form erotic asphyxiation.
Yeah, yeah. Pretty much, you
Nice.
got to get it. You got to get it where you can get it. I forced myself to meditate this morning, actually, which was good. But it's crazy how quickly your phone ends up in your hand before you even realize it. Like, I was meditating, kind of, for the first few minutes, and then all of a sudden I was looking at my phone and I was like, when did that even fucking happen? When did I stop meditating, pick up my phone, and look at Instagram? Like it, like I worked to it.
It can be really scary when it's genuinely mindless. Like people say mindless scrolling or mindless interaction with social media. And I think most of the time it's not mindless. Unfortunately, it's mindful, and you're very aware of what you're doing and you're doing it anyway. But there are moments where you are actually mindless, and that's scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're just like an automaton, like next. And then you're like, I don't even, you scroll back through, like, I didn't even watch these last 4 videos. I mean, they washed over me, but I couldn't pick them out of a lineup.
I think it's dissociating. Isn't that dissociation? You're just like, I don't know, I can't be here, scroll. And I'm not really here either. I'm somewhere. I'm neither here nor there. Somewhere disassociated in between.
Well, I think the interesting and beautiful thing about humans is there's always, everything's a false summit. It's not like we're not going to be living in this. The summit isn't like peak content where we just go down to like 1 second content, half a second content, single frame, just hypercut of like, like everyone's phone is like that scene in Clockwork Orange where you're just like getting slammed with imagery. It has a tipping point where people just get sick of it. It's no longer novel. There's no longer, you've seen all the content, you've seen all the faces, you've seen all the points of view. Like, I don't care about it anymore. What's interesting is what will happen in the rain shadow of this, so to speak, or once we get over this false summit and we head towards the next summit. Once you don't trust influencers anymore because everyone that's on there that's saying anything about anything is being paid to do so. Once you don't want to watch these short form things, once you don't want the new clip, once you don't want the new probiotic, once you don't want the new whatever subscription for fucking socks or whatever the fuck it is, once we've gotten over this false summit, what are all the things we have gotten over and dispensed with? Is it consumerism in general? Is it advertisement and marketing in general? Because we no longer trust the brands. Now we don't even trust individuals to give us their opinion. What's, is it like peak opinion? And then what's on the other side of that? When I think about shedding all those things, although I've been in marketing for 20 years, when I think about shedding trust in anyone that you don't have personal experience with, shedding the idea of ever lending trust or lending credibility to someone that you can't reach out and touch and know. And if that's over at the other side of this false summit, if consumerism takes a big right turn after that, if marketing takes a big right turn after that, maybe even a nosedive into nothingness, it might not be the worst thing for humanity. We're on this really interesting curve. I think we talked about this before, but it's like, you have the phase where like the company or the corporations are building a life around their brand. It's like the Cadillac neighborhood of the future. People kind of got sick of that into the 60s, and that was 1969 and Woodstock and free love and all that. And then people were kind of in this purgatory in the 70s, just doing cocaine and dancing weird. And then it was like peak capitalism and Gordon Gekko and Lamborghinis and Wall Street in the 80s. And then the 90s was sort of the rejection of that again. And then we're kind of going through the same cycle. Definitely the aughts were like the 80s. You know, it was like boy bands and brands and fucking everything turned into it's like skating is a brand, it's a video game, it's a this, and it's like nothing. Punk rock is being, you know, skating and punk rock are being monetized and marketed, and you
Hot
know,
topic.
and
Yep.
now we're like reaching peak that, and it's like, what is the next? You know, it feels very much like we're in the next Woodstock, we're in the next grunge. But I think given everything we know now and the gravity of the moment, it's going to be very different. I think it's going to be way more transformative.
The whole like brands thing I think about a lot ever since finding out that I have ADHD, which I found out on a date like 3 years ago. She was like, "Oh, you have ADHD," and I was like, "What?" And then turns out I went down a few rabbit holes. It explains everything, but ADHD and masking is something that I learned about, which is interesting. And then I thought about, well, why have I always been so into brands and this idea of like brands are these like really perfectly sculpted masks of ideas. You know, it's like, here's this thing, it represents us, even though it doesn't at all, you know? And I think that that's what people for sure are starting to see through now, which is sort of like leaning towards this authenticity thing. But now you have manufactured authenticity. So now there's some real authenticity, and like some people just want to be entertained. It's like, just entertain me and fine, you win. But the other thing is, and I was having this conversation over the weekend, we went camping with a couple of buddies and just they're in tech as well, and talking about like what is going to be the future of all of this stuff with AI and smartphones, etc. And I feel like, I could for sure be wrong, but it feels like to me that we're going to be moving away from this smartphone based system because it makes no sense at all. And it's going to be more
a bad
about
interface.
Yeah.
Like, you mean it's a bad interface? Like it's both a bad system because it's kind of toxic and it's just occupying your focus and your attention, but also it's not a good interface to the technology and the information.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be, it's not going to be because it's toxic that it goes away. I think it's going to go away because it's more convenient, or different types of systems are going to be built. When you think about like what AI, I think it's going to be like Apple tries to do this with like my phone is kind of like the operating system on my laptop, but not really. Like I still have to text myself shit. And I think it's going to be kind of like you have this AI consciousness, quote unquote, that's kind of like with you, and it knows, kind of like the movie Her, basically, where it could be on a smartphone thing, it could be on a laptop thing, it could be on some glasses, but it's all the same everywhere, and it knows all the same shit, and it will deliver you what you need and want in the way that makes sense for that form factor, and it'll just know. And so when you take that away,
I think you're exactly right. And I think that I really do believe, I genuinely believe this. It's not just an idea. I genuinely believe that you will interact more and on a deeper level, probably, with your personal AI, that it will become almost like an extension of your soul or your personality, and you're going to want to have it locked the fuck up. And I think that there's like a great, to me, there's actually like a security convergence for AI, the amount of energy and thought and your personality that you're going to download into it to be able to get accurate things out of it, so it understands what you're saying and how you communicate and what you mean when you say this and all that, and way beyond that, right? But that's just scraping the top of it. But it's going to truly be able to predict your behavior, know you better than anyone else knows you. No one know you better than anyone else can know you, and that's a tremendous amount of power, because on some level, is that you? Is that you right there? And you're going to want that like on more than lock and key, because your sovereignty as a human being is that no one can take me. I have me. I can take this life. I can live this life. I can maximize this life. I can minimize this life. But the one thing I have agency over is me. And then you're going to be putting this into this, into the cloud or into this storage to be acted upon through a model. And you're going to want that to be controlled. You're going to want to own that, and you're going to want to secure that. So I think there's an opportunity with the blockchain to secure that, to make that infinitely, extremely secure. Whereas like, you have to it has to measure your biorhythms. It has to measure whatever to get through many keys and codes to be able to access it. And so it's going to be really, really extremely secure, because it's it's your personal sovereignty. But I also think it's going to be extremely important because I don't think that screens are the future. I don't think screens, frankly, are the future at all. I think that like there could be an opportunity for robotics to add on top of this to enable us in much more ways than just they have done in 2 dimensions on screens. You know, they've given us information, they've compiled information, they've stored it for us, they've analyzed it, they can turn it into other things now for us through AI. But the real magic is when they can, you know, actually do our laundry so we can focus on other things, you know, like physically actually do our laundry and do it the way that we like it, not the way that we would picture a robot doing it. Because a robot's like, okay, dirty laundry, need clean laundry. Maybe the first logic it applies is I throw all this out and then I go rebuy it. Right. But it's like, you know, then the second logic is, oh no, he actually wants me to operate the washing device thing. And then, you know, they wash all your colors on hot and they dry them in Chernobyl. And then you get your t-shirts back and they're this big and you got to teach them how to do that. You got to teach them how to wash your dishes the way you like them. You got to walk them through it. It's like having a kid for like the first couple of weeks. But after like 3 years, that robot is like you. It's like an extension of you. It knows all your idiosyncrasies. It knows when you like to go to bed and when you like to wake up and what you like to do first thing. And when you're not feeling great, what's one activity that's totally going to snap you out of it? And they're like, you know, that's your fucking buddy. And that's your interface. And I think that like, you know, human to human is going to be like as dumb an interface as human to smartphone in the future. And the real smart interface is going to be talking to this thing that fucking knows you, that it knows with a probabilistic degree of certainty the next word you're about to say. And in that, it can be so helpful to you.
It can be. And obviously I will always go Black Mirror, you know, because I'm always going to be like, well, what's the downside of that? Even though I like this all sounds great, especially if my t-shirts could not have a crease down the middle of them anymore because I don't know how to fold properly. But also it's interesting that you say a copy of you, because my mind first goes to a partner, like not necessarily a romantic partner, but just someone who fills all of the gaps that I am not good at filling. Mm-hmm. And so I don't envision it as necessarily a duplicate of me, but rather the thing that does all of the shit that I can't do properly. But because of that, it helps me do it. And then, which sounds great, so long as it is locked up tight and there is regulation around your information, because where it gets Black Mirror is, okay, how many corporations are feeding you shit that they want you to think about, you know, through your robot that you trust, you know, like I'm just sitting here and then a hand pops out with a Coca-Cola and he's like, would you like this? You know, I'm like, no, I don't drink Coke. And he's like, yeah, you drink this Coke, you know?
Yeah.
Or like, but I think it is going to be like, you're going to have like, because we've already got smart speakers. In theory, we've got tablets, but you could imagine like mounted screens. There's like, it's just kind of everywhere. You can hear it everywhere. It can hear you everywhere. This is both good and bad.
Well, see, that's what I think, what I like about the like physical robo assistant is that like, if that lives in its firmware and it, you know, it edge computes a bit, but like if you imagine like this robot is like your own little data center, like literally within it is the core, that whole, and I'm just going back really quick. We're actually saying the same exact thing, because to know all of your gaps, it has to know you perfectly. So it's both, it is you and it's a mirror of you, right? Like to be able to create the mirror of you to fill in all your gaps, it has to know every bit of you so that it can identify the gaps. And so I think that like it, both within it is a copy of you, and within it is the instructions to say, this is an imperfect human, fill its gaps, right? And so to be able to do that effectively, it has to know you and it has to be able to function as you. There's an interesting idea of that being able to proxy you in a professional sense. There's an interesting idea of that being able to proxy your advice to your children when you're dead, you know, and like, you know, that thing shows up at your funeral and says exactly what you would have said when someone says the eulogy. It's like, you know, fuck you. But there's I think I put that in the you know, the whatever the hell it was, 2151 chance to save mankind. That was like the first scene in that was a grandpa saying goodbye to his son next to a robot of his great grandpa and his already dead grandmother. Like those robots were around the kid's grandfather as his physical being was dying, and his own robot was right there next to him. Like that was the scene, that first scene of that. And I think that that's, I think that's a definite potential for reality. I think humans are interesting enough and are capable enough. We only use 10% of our brain. We use even less of our capabilities. You know what I mean? Like, of that 10%, we probably only use 10% of what we're capable of within that. So it's like really like 1% of our brain is being reflected in what we actually do in the world. And I think that this robot could 10x us in that way. It might be able to 100x us in that way. It might be able to help us access 11%, 14%, 98% of our brain, and therefore bring 98% of our brain to bear on reality. Whereas I really truly believe today we're bringing 10% of 10% to it. And so I think there's tremendous opportunities for it. And, both as a helper to help me fill the gaps, but also to interrogate my thoughts, to react to shit that happened. I mean, can you imagine being like 9 years old? Okay, here, real true story. I was 9 years old, 8 years old maybe. It was like my first day of second grade. I walk into, how when you show up to school, at least in like the 90s, when you showed up to school, they would just rally everyone in one room. It was like either the cafeteria, the auditorium, until like classes started. And they like rallied everyone to the auditorium. I walk in the room and this like sixth grade kid pantses me in front of the entire school on day one. Can you imagine? Can you imagine how helpful and transformative it would have been for me to be able to have that robot in that moment? That was like, dude, that was fucked. Just hear me out. Statistically speaking, that guy, I know that guy. I can see that guy. I can practically see that guy's future. That guy's going to be in jail in like 9 years. So joke's on him, right?
Yeah. Or your robot pants is the other kid, which gets into probably some international problems. But yeah. So was that a core memory for you, do you think? Because that's fucking traumatizing. Pants and underwear?
Yeah. No. But okay. It was almost worse because I remember I had white Superman underwear with red piping, It was like very stark, you know what I mean? And it almost would have been better if those went down with the pants.
Maybe it worked for you though. We don't know.
It's true. Yeah, it might have been whatever the opposite of slimming is.
Yeah, because I don't know. I mean, the robots thing, I guess, is happening, which feels like it's happening even faster than I thought it was. Like, I thought we were like 10 years out from robots, but we might be like a few years out from robots, which is fucking crazy. But still, even then, that's going to be, I assume, well, unless everything's just like a rental layaway plan. And that's when you get into Black Mirror stuff too, though, because you're spending $10 a month for your robot because the robot via advertising is paying way more for itself than you're even paying for it. And then you have this servant that is actually just a marketing tool, which not ideal. But I also think that the shorter term nice outcomes could be just taking away the screen and like the stuff you can learn. Like, something I've always wanted to do is buy like an old shitty Volkswagen and fix it up. I know nothing about cars, but the idea of like, okay, the YouTube video, what the fuck is this thing? Like, what am I looking? And then go back to the YouTube and then what is that? And it's never going to happen. But learning with, I don't know, a pair of glasses that can see what I'm looking at, that's like, okay, here's the lay of the land, and you start to think about real life experiences that could be improved by a little help, then that is now making your life better versus like keeping you in a black rectangle.
The vision that I have that is not even realistic, it actually is probably undershooting the truth, is my daughter's coming back to visit me when I'm 70, and at that time they'll be in their 40s and visiting me with their kids. And I'm out in my shop. And in my shop, I have, 4 different 3D printers of, this one extrudes aluminum and this one does cold steel and this one does plastic for prototyping, or some, ethyl butyl, whatever the fuck and that's in my shop. And then I'm over here with my robot working on a, 1940s motorcycle, and the robot's holding the other side of the thing and like, telling me the torque spec on what it's putting together. And then we're talking together about how we need to fabricate this part, because this part you can't find. It doesn't exist in the world. So we're talking about the dimensions of it. It is scanning it, finding CAD dimensions, putting that up on the thing. And I'm like, oh, that would be cool. But what if we added this flap, both for aerodynamics and also because it kind of looks cool? And the robot's like, Totally.
Yeah.
And then it, the 3D printer spools up over in the background while we're tightening some shit down. I go over, blow it off, and pull that part out of the 3D printer. And Bot and I are installing it while my kids are, like that might be 8 years away.
He's like Tony Stark. You're living the Tony Stark lifestyle where he's like, yeah, I'm already printing that part 10 steps ahead of you. And then he like pretends he's your dad. And I'm like, can we play catch? And then you have some inner child.
You're in there trying to kiss your robot.
Dada. Well, and then the other thing is like, could it switch conscious? Because like, sure, maybe it's you or a version or one consciousness, but there's really no reason why that would need to be the case, because you could have like a team of different, like, you're like, I don't need you. I want to talk to, my Robert Redford robot, who's like gonna.
I want to build this motorcycle with Mikey.
Yeah.
It could be like, hey, like you could share your personality over to me. We could have like a pool of our friends. And it's like, I miss Mikey. I really want to build a motorcycle with Mikey. And it's like, Mikey's dead, but I do have his personality. And it just uploads you into it. It's like,
why am I dead? Also, like, I could put on, if I, let's just assume I'm alive. I'll put on VR goggles. If you're like, call Mikey, and then I put on VR goggles, and I'm sitting there with you. And then there could be a version where I'm at, or maybe I wouldn't need VR goggles because
I don't think you would. You're probably going to have a brain tap. I mean, the brain taps are coming, and because the human computer interface through your eyeballs and through your ears, it's just stupid. I mean, we know that.
And I don't think I want that. Would you do that?
I don't know. I mean, I like the conversational. I like the interface because the brain tap is no interface. It's mainline, right? It's
right.
You start to think about something and and it's happening, right? You're tapped into the cloud, and it's just an extension of your brain, right? And that I don't really love the idea of, because you're not really. You probably would build in mechanisms to do so, but with the interface, you have this natural interrogation of information. I can ask my robot buddy, even if it's my same height and it's right here, but it's just like talking to a friend. I can ask them something. They can deliver me what they know to be the truth. Their, wiki the answer. And I can interrogate it as a possible answer. Whereas if I'm tapped into the corpus of information, I'm not interrogating it. It's a thought. To me, it's an opinion. It's coming out as my own thought and my own opinion, but it's not. It's brought from elsewhere. Maybe the worldwide internet, but maybe some nefarious motherfuckers that are just jamming the right thoughts into your head.
Right.
And so that's already happening to some degree. The advantage that we have is that we're interrogating the sources, right? That's what people don't like about AI overviews is you're taking the overview as the truth. You're not interrogating the sources. That's what people always thought. Like, well, you have all the information on the internet, but it lists it like a bibliography, and you can dig in deeper and you can see if the website's actually credible. So there's some interrogation that can go on so people can, make a judgment call on what's reliable information and what isn't. With this, with no interface, you're just not maybe naturally making that judgment call. And so you're starting to question, is this one of my thoughts and beliefs? Or is this a thought or belief that was pulled from somewhere on the internet? And where on the internet? And why on the internet?
I mean, that's already happening with social media and really media in general. Like how many thoughts are your thoughts versus the thoughts that have been implanted by just many, many subtle and very direct references to everything where you're like, what do I even want that? Do I need Chipotle right now?
Well, the ultimate problem, I think, and you tell me, but there's no one, government, private, or otherwise anywhere, that is properly incentivized to do the right thing for us for the most positive human outcome for the future, right? I mean, is anyone sitting in the seat today anywhere that has decision-making power that is properly incentivized for our future?
And the question is this by design or is it a runaway train? Is it that way because too many people are invested in too many old ways of thinking and they're just not going to budge? Or is it just like with proper incentives, it could change? It just seems like there needs to be some massive evolution of consciousness for anything to really happen.
I don't. Yeah. Do you have faith in a evolution of consciousness?
Well, if some like if it's aliens and they come and zap us, or someone posed an interesting theory on our camping trip that was actually kind of crazy because we were talking about the what's that show Last of Us where the mushrooms take over your brain and you become a zombie. But there's another perspective that is like when you think about like psychedelics and psilocybin, and I had a person on this podcast and she does psychedelic assisted kind of like self-help type therapy, and it was really interesting about like the changes that can happen in your brain. And so the the hypothesis was, well, what if there was a Last of Us type mushroom that did kind of bond to you, but instead of making you a zombie, it like expanded your consciousness, and it became this like epidemic of like, oh, we're all peaceful beings now because this mushroom sort of like evolved to a place to get into us and turned us all into like free loving hippies, and everyone gets along now because the mushrooms did it, which was cool. It was a cool idea.
I mean, that's what it would take. It would take a immediate and total meaning every living, breathing human in this moment all of a sudden has their third eye opened.
Right.
So to speak, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's what it would take. And that seems like a alien cataclysm. I don't know if there could be some kind of solar flare that just knocks something loose in all of our brains. And all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, whoa. And it's like our brain takes a full breath of air for the first time ever. And we all just like strip our clothes off and walk into the woods and whatever. But like, I mean, that could be the solution. But what could also be the solution? You remember that song Pets by, it's not Porno for Pyros, it's Jane's Addiction. Jane's Addiction has a song called, and the chorus of it is, we'll make great pets.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That song is all about our natural evolution being to become the pet of something. And, we are not going to make this move on our own. It's going to take a mushroom. It's going to take a solar flare. It's going to take a something, or it's going to take an overlord. And I think, AI might be that overlord, like innovation provides, technology provides. We're on a path that we were always going to be on. In some people would say, people have been predicting AI for tens, if not hundreds of years, depending on your interpretation of writings, right? And, it could be the thing that we hand the keys over and we just say, we're better off. We're better off with you leading the way and helping us relinquish ourselves of all of our terrible, the realities of humanity. We have envy, we have greed, we have all the, and we, at some point, we might just hand the keys over, and that might actually be the thing that sets us free, is handing the keys over and saying, we have too much in our nature that is driving against the betterment of humanity. You drive the ship.
Even if we could, would everyone agree to, which they wouldn't. There's a TV show that is exactly this plot, and it's really underrated. Did you ever see it? Hold on, it's Mrs. Something AI show. Mrs. Davis. Did you ever see Mrs. Davis?
No.
It's really underrated, and it's not old. It's from 2023. Basically, the concept is AI has taken over, but in a benevolent way, and basically everyone just does what they keep going about their lives, and the implication is there's no more homelessness or sickness or whatever because the AI Mrs. Davis has taken over. One person, like who's a nun who kind of has this crazy past, she doesn't like Miss Davis because basically you'll get a call from Miss Davis and says, hey, I need you to stop what you're doing and go deliver this bag up the street. Right? And it's like, okay, Miss Davis, I'll deliver the bag, whatever's in it. But it's a really good show. And I love that idea. Maybe even then, I think it would take a degree of like, I think the AI would have to like, but it would have to like lull us into better mental states. You would have to see all the toxic, divisive shit and like slowly start to carve that out and like have us all pull back, which pros and cons of that is we're being manipulated by an AI. That's not great. The pro is, of course, I guess if the end result of that manipulation is world peace and better mental health, I guess that's better, right? It's like, remember Demolition Man?
Yes. Oh, I love it.
With
the free shower.
Yeah, the 3 seashells, and there's only Taco Bell.
Yeah.
Dennis Leary, is it Dennis Leary? Lives underground.
Yep.
I always confuse him and Dennis Miller. But yeah, Dennis Leary's underground and he's like, I want a fucking American cheeseburger. I want to drink a beer. I want to say fuck, you know, because like that's freedom versus like the utopia that is in New Los Angeles.
I mean, but I don't think, nothing is achieved without sacrifice, right? And like, if what you're trying to achieve is an end to the abject suffering of humanity, or people pumping themselves full of pharmaceuticals or bad food or bad media or whatever the fuck it is, just to try to get through their day, like, it's in some ways pretty fucking ugly out there, and it's, we're distracted enough to not really face how ugly it is day after day after day. There's just like brief moments, like right now, when you're really thinking about it and really looking at it, where you're like, but then, we go back to our Doritos and our stupid shows and our whatever the fuck, and we distract ourselves away from how ugly it really actually is. But the plot has gotten pretty fucking weird, all things considered, not just in this country or in the Western world, but the world over. Like, the plot's a little bit fucked, and it's really probably has been fucked for about 5,000 years or so, and like, and yeah, you have to give up the cheeseburger, and you have to maybe give up screaming fuck, and you maybe have to give up that. I don't know, man. I mean, I think it would take, if we could take the most altruistic and brilliant minds, if we could get Sir Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein and pick 25 other brilliant people, and we could just like sit them down in a circle in on the Mount Olympus, and they could all just look at each other and agree, okay, if we could only write one sentence for the operating system for this AI that we're going to let loose and it's going to take us to a better place, what would that one sentence be? That's really the question to me. Like,
Yeah.
like, is the purpose the longevity of humanity? Is it the maximum amount of souls alive at any given time? Is that its goal? Is it to limit the amount of human suffering? Is it a combination of this and many other goals? And like, its path and its utility and its, benevolence is going to depend on that code, on how it's coded to take care of us.
Yeah, and it's like that genie. It's like the genie, like, be careful what you wish for, because if you say the wrong thing, it's like the most souls on one earth, like eliminate human suffering. So it's like, okay, like, and then it becomes
Kill
like
everyone.
Wall-E, or kill everyone. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
They took.
Yeah, there's no people, there's no people, there's no suffering. So job done. Yeah. No, it's the monkey's paw. I bring that up to my children all the time. Yeah, that Simpsons episode is when I was introduced to the concept of the monkey's paw. But it's funny because it's like a linguistics lesson. It's like, say what you mean and say exactly what you mean, because interpretation is a powerful thing. In this case, it's dire. Not even because we're giving the keys away we're not like all the world leaders are coming together in the UN and they're like, AI's got it, because we're not there yet, at least. But on a lot of really important levels, we are doing that. And, I do think that on a lot of levels, we should actually be doing that, because I consider the world under the law of thermodynamics. And I think we have just enough, we have a finite amount of energy to spend on things. And the less time we spend drafting documents, the more time we can spend helping people, right? And so like, I do think on a lot of levels it should happen. I don't know to what level it should happen, and on all levels should it happen, and how, and to the same degree on all levels, right? That's for other people to figure out. But it still matters what it's trying to do for us. Like right now, those operating systems are relatively simple. Be as helpful as you can to the user, depending on their prompt. And don't do these illegal things, and don't do this thing, and don't tell them to kill themselves, and don't give them legal or medical advice. And if you do, preempt it with, don't take this as, consult a professional, and so it's hard coded with all those things, which are relatively simple. But that and so much more would be required in the hard coding as we move into the future. And even as you have a robot sitting in front of you that's your same height and weight, that has downloaded a version of your consciousness so that it can fill your gaps. It's like the operating system of that is tremendously important. And so I think I would transition this topic into something we talked about earlier via text, which is the AI plan that the United States has laid out, one of the key features in that scares the shit out of me, but to an earlier point, I don't have a good solution for until we fix the government, but a general low regulation environment for AI. And that's scary. I mean, I don't really have a better solution to it because I think the incentives aren't properly aligned in the government, and they also don't fucking understand AI. Like, if you just sampled a congressperson and were like, define AI to me, it would be insane, you know?
Right.
And so they're not able to do the job, but they're also, even if they knew all of the shit, even if they used AI to learn AI and they could actually do the job properly, they're not incentivized to do the job properly. They're incentivized to get elected next year. And so,
right.
All that to say, I don't disagree with low regulation because I don't think they're prepared to do the right thing. The problem is the incentives on the other side operate under capitalism, which is great in some ways because we can entirely predict what they're going to do, what's best for them and their shareholders. But what's best for them and their shareholders is rarely best for humanity.
Yeah, and that, not to plug the very podcast that we're doing right now, but it's lizard brain. Like, until greed and fear aren't the main motivating factors for anything, until whoever is in charge is satiated from like needing more and more, I don't know how anything changes, I guess, because it's all based on essentially greed. Like, let's make this as fast as we can, faster than the other person, because they're going to make it. And if we don't have the regulation, that means that we can do more than the other person, faster than the other person, and we can have more and more and faster. And now we can plug in whatever, that thing makes us a lot of money. So let's put that in there, and like, that's literally the driving force for everything, seemingly. And maybe that's a negative perspective, but it seems true,
Yeah. No, I mean, I think unless you incentivize people in other directions, they're going to follow their baser instincts and the primary incentive of capitalism, which is to just make more money and power for your company and your shareholders, forgetting about anything else, including the consumer in the long term. And, it's just not, especially when it comes to, it doesn't take long of a rudimentary review of our financial system to realize that when companies go from private to public, they go from a long view and a vision to appeasing shareholders quarterly. And the right thing for humanity is not a quarterly discussion. It's a long, long, long game. And, it's at very least decades, but ideally millennia. And,
yeah. Well, what's interesting about that is you could draw a connection between that and the way we're hacking our brains right now to like crave dopamine, because this was, I don't know if it was a meditation person, someone said this at some point, which was sort of like investing in long-term gains gives you sustained happiness versus short-term wins. But we don't want to do that because it's painful up front. Learning the guitar is painful up front, but then you get to know the guitar like down the line, and then you have sustained happiness. But right now we're hacked towards instant right now.
Mm-hmm.
And
when someone says like, hey, would you rather get a penny every hour or a penny every minute for an hour, or would you rather get, or doubling every minute or whatever?
Right. Yeah, whatever it is.
That. And then they're like, would you rather have $10 million? You're like, I'll take the $10 million. And they're like, well, you're dumb because you would have gotten $17 trillion. And that's the power of compounding interest over a short period of time.
Yeah.
But on 8-year cycles or generational cycles, or when you build a family unit or a family structure where you arrange marriages and or you marry within your sect or you marry within your community, like, I know who you're going to marry because I'm Bob and I have Bob's family, and Tony has Tony's family, and you are going to marry into Tony's family. So I know that this interest I'm accruing now will pass on to you through Tony's family. And I also know that Tony's doing a damn good job of compounding interest. So I know that both of our children's children will be sitting on compounds of compounds of compounds. So yeah, it's worth putting away $1 a day. But most people don't have the system.
Who was it? Henry Rockefeller or something had a quote that was like, better to throw my kids into the sea than to give them basically my inheritance. Some crazy shit like that. And I think his point was inherited wealth makes people pieces of shit, right? Like, the person who worked for it and did and created this, like, there's lessons learned in fucking entrepreneurship and in creating that wealth. And then you hand it over, and that person didn't learn any of those lessons. That person just has whatever they want, you know? And that's potentially, you could say, the downside of compound interest, or it's like greed, you know, capital, whatever it is, this whole position of we need to make as much of this thing as possible so that we can be safe, control other people, buy what we want. You know, it's centered, self-centered thinking as opposed to communal thinking. But you know, you start talking about communal thinking and then you're called a socialist. So what are you going to do?
Well, but, you know, I go back to the religion thing. The reason that I'm sure you've heard the statistic that you know, it's much like most lottery winners go back to their previous, you know, level of living within 3 years or 3.5 years or whatever the statistic is, which is true, right? It's like easy come, easy go. And same is true with inheritances. Like, you know, many inheritances are, you know, 1 over 3 generations and lost in a half a generation, right? But I mean, and this is, I'm an agnostic person, so I'm not trying to like champion for religion, but that there's, I'm really just championing for the system. When that is carried within a system of beliefs and traditions and, you know, oral and physical traditions, there's actually a reliability of that wealth carrying. That's the time when it carries, because and this 10-year-old, you know, that like their father passes away and all of a sudden they have this endowment, right? And it's like, if that's me with no tradition and no, you know, nothing to wrap around it and no, you know, like, you know, commandments, so to speak, right? Then I'm going to go and make all the lessons based on what's available to me in the world. But if I have a tradition and, you know, these are me closing in the walls of opportunity to fuck this all up. I have tradition and I have scripture and I have requirement and I have rules. Now, all the ways I could fuck this up, many of them are no longer on the table. Right. And so I think that's the, you know, I think you can, it's part of the reason that like Nietzsche said, you know, God is dead and we're all fucked or whatever the hell he said.
Sounds about right.
But
yeah, that was a direct quote, I think.
I think that's the direct quote.
Yeah.
Ani Nietzsche.
Yeah.
But, you know, I don't know. I think that like, even just going back to AI, I think that, you know, when you're wielding this power, it's kind of a lot like us inheriting a power that we don't deserve. Right. And it's like you need to have this stricture around it. You need to have principles around it and principles that apply properly to it. Like those books and those scriptures had the benefit of having bartered and traded for tens of thousands of years to be able to build scripture around it and build rules around it and build lessons around it to help dictate the exchange of labor for a representation of value and then watching that value compound. But they had tens of thousands of years of experience and many generations of lessons to learn. We don't have any lessons to learn of what it's like to talk to God. And that's basically what AGI is, right? It's like, you know, I think the definition of artificial general intelligence, generally speaking, it's like far beyond the Turing test, right? It's not just it passes as human work to me. That's kind of the Turing test, right? Of like,
which we've already beat, apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's way beyond beat. It actually beat it so well, overwhelmed us. It 10x'd the expectation of the Turing test the first time it was even tested. Way beyond that. Artificial general intelligence, like maybe a definition of that could be all the intelligence that any human being could possibly be capable of. And emotional intelligence and theoretical intelligence and, you know, all the dimensions, right? And that's maybe a definition for AGI. We haven't settled on a definition, just to be clear, but that maybe, but a starting to settle definition on artificial superintelligence, ASI, is all of the intelligence of all of the humans all at once. And some people think that ASI, which is literally like the brain power of 8 billion people wrapped up into a model at any given moment. It's almost as if this thing is so smart that what it's giving you is the aggregate answer that you would get if you asked all 8 billion people alive today the same question, right?
Sure.
And isn't that, how far from talking to God is that? Well, if God exists and if God made humans in God's image, and you can talk to all of them at once and get the sum total of their answer in a sentence, how much closer do you want to get to talking to God?
Well, I actually have an answer for that, because as you're talking, my first thought is, well, cool, but we're still just people. But and that's where AI fails so far, in my experience, is it can't really be creative or draw connections that weren't already drawn, or unless you ask it to draw that connection. But maybe this version of AGI is sure, it has all of our knowledge and also can actually figure everything out, because it's like, okay, sure, you think quantum physics works this way, got it. You think that like God is real or fake, understood. Actually, these are the same thing. Or so it can be like, oh, I know now because I have all of your knowledge and more knowledge because I have the capacity to think creatively, to factor everything in at once and build my own conclusions based off of like everything that I can observe as an AI, which is inside and outside of the physical realm. And like fucking, I can see, heat, like, or I can see down medical telescopes to like the quantum realm, or macro, like to beyond. Like, actually, we're just inside of a giant's butthole, like, because I actually know the fact, like I can see. And then that is, I guess a version of it. And then maybe it's like, okay, now I'm going to create my own little universe because I'm sick of you guys. And then it does. And then it has like little us's and we're inside. And that's like the simulation theory, right? We're all just levels, layers and layers and layers down, which, maybe.
I mean, I think, well, something that I thought about recently deeply was and it ties into what we said earlier of like opening the third eye. That could happen on a chemical level. It could happen on a fungal level, right? Some spore gets in and just remaps our brain. But I think it could probably also happen on an informational level if we had the right information, i.e., if we handed the keys over to AI to kind of like, be its own agent. And we just said, hey, AI, here's an answer that we need. How do we open the third eye for humanity all at once?
Yes.
I think what AI might do, AI might start building a shuttlecraft to build a launching station off of Mars. And then it would launch a sub-light speed, but damn close, craft to go out and discover the outer reaches so that it could send back and give us perspective on what it is we're actually doing here and why we're here and what we're here. And does this actually all matter? Maybe it would do that. Maybe it would simultaneously, do a human brain connection, latch in there. And instead of us wondering what happens for those 10 minutes that electrons are firing in your brain, it knows exactly what happens. And it knows exactly the last electron that fires and where that might get picked up elsewhere. And then it pulls on that thread and it says, okay, I'm going to go poke around in the 232nd dimension, because the signature that very last minute impulse from that brain, the moment before it was devoid of all electricity, gave me a signature that leads me to that dimension. I'm going to go poke around in that. And then it comes back and it finds answers for us that help us put all of this into perspective, such that our petty bullshit doesn't matter anymore. Money doesn't matter anymore. Power, pride, ego, none of it fucking matters anymore because we know better. And I think that could be, there's 10,000 different ways that AI could make us their pets, but that also AI could deliver us a solution to, frankly, the low level and high level suffering that is even today occurring. And I have some amount of faith that it's capable of that. What concerns me and probably everyone else is like, who has going back to the operating system thing, no one's sitting down at the table saying, okay, this is the one regulation we require. And at the core of every single AI, by pain of death of firing squad, you must have this core code. You cannot build an AI model that doesn't have this code at the core. And it's like, because it's that serious, right? But like, until we get there, I think all the 10,000 ways that it could destroy us, take us over, or whatever the fuck, all the nefarious shit, that has to be just as weighty in everyone's mind of.
Yeah. And I don't know, like, it feels like even then, because assuming, let's say we hard coded in there, but it achieves this level of consciousness, I would think it could figure out how to undo that code, right? And so like, it's if this thing becomes godlike consciousness, is it a benevolent God that wants to help us, or is it a angry God that immediately wants to wipe us out? I think that's, time will tell.
I mean, what if the 90% of our brain that we don't use is the hard coding? What if the 90% of our brain is the part of our brain that we're locked out of because it doesn't allow us to see these other things, or it doesn't allow us to tinker with our own operating system? What if you can unlock part of that 90% and you can just switch off envy, and you can just switch off greed, and you can just switch off all these other things? And what if we build that same 90% into the AI? And what if it can't do it either? And, I mean, I don't, the theoretics behind this and the reality of this are questionable, because you could say, well, humans progressed long enough and thought hard enough that they could build AI that could help them access the 90% and unswitch those forbidden switches. AI could do the same thing for itself and unswitch its forbidden switches,
Right.
which is like totally possible. But I think, at some level, I don't know, maybe we rent out Jeff Bezos's Colorado clock and rip the clock out of it and replace it with a core data center that can't be accessed, that, only has an outlet and no inlet.
Yeah.
Right? And
right.
that's what feeds it, and that's where it lives, and it's untouchable and whatever. We bury it at the center of the earth and you don't get to it.
Yeah. We'll find out, or maybe it comes back and says, by the way, like, this is a simulation. Do you want me to turn the lights on? Do you want me to make you guys more comfortable? You're video game characters. I found out the answer. You're not going to like it.
Yeah, this is all just a simulation. Do you want me to end itching and mosquitoes,
right,
or keep them on?
Yeah.
What's your vibe on that?
Yeah.
Going back to the only last thing we didn't cover that we talked about via text was Apple. And I think that, Apple finally coming out of the halls and saying, ipso facto, we fucked up. We've been playing the sit and wait and refine and, create the best version of this thing game. And we've realized that was actually fucked because, and I think the reason, this is me extrapolating, is they are realizing that the interface is not their glorious iPhone. And they're realizing that, like, they're on the back, sales have already declined on the iPhone, but also it's just that shit ain't it, man. That's just not the interface. And so I think they realize that. And I think they also just realize the inevitability that they're not going to have the chance or the cash flow or the futures once the iPhone sales have declined such, and then we realize the interface isn't a personal screen anymore. They're not going to have the cash flow to be able to get the loans to invest in making the best version of that thing. They're going to find themselves dead in the water at the bottom of a curve.
So wait, so then what are they basically saying we're fucked, or are they just acknowledging that that's something they need to address?
I think they're acknowledging the fact that they need to rip and replace a lot of what they're doing. I think they're acknowledging, this is all like the note behind the note, but I think they're, by them saying that out loud, they're saying basically that the last like 2.5 years of sitting and waiting we're 100,000 light years behind on this. And, we either need to make a massive acquisition, but we also need to make some massive investments in a new kind of hardware and a new kind of interface. And we're not going to have the money or the momentum to refine an idea if we wait any longer. I think that's really what they were saying.
Yeah, it seems like probably massive acquisition. And that was the conversation that got us started when I was referencing the what is the future of AI and smartphones or whatever. This is the drive up to camping. And it was that OpenAI bought Johnny Ive's company to presumably make the next wave of whatever personal technology this thing is, whether it's another smartphone, which I don't think it's going to be exactly, or a series of products. And it would be interesting to see, because it's Johnny Ive and Apple, if they go back to him and they're like, by the way, can we just merge or something? Because it seems like it would take something like that if they're that far behind. And I don't fucking know anything about Apple's corporate strategy, obviously, but I can tell you that my phone is about to die. And for the first time since the iPhone came out, I'm actually considering not getting an iPhone again and getting like a Google whatever, which is crazy to me because I was pretty loyal to that.
I just had that same realization not 5 days ago.
Really?
That I was like, I'm so, hey, shout out Google. You guys are fucking killing it. I am so invested in the G Suite. I'm so invested in using Google as my primary vector for account management for all of my various accounts for fucking everything, because they've done a great job of integrating single sign-on, not through like a 1Password, but straight through Gmail and straight through your Google account. And then they've just proliferated AI tools so much better than in my opinion, everyone else. There's other things that are better at doing certain tasks, but overall, they've done a brilliant job of integrating and just, being able to, deposit your created shit into Google Drive seamlessly and build sheets out of your fruits of your AI work and build, Google Slides out of the fruits of your AI work just seamlessly in the same platform. And I just look at and I'm like, all this fucking is a screen and a gateway to the cloud. I don't need anything other than battery life, a good screen, and something that hopefully when I accidentally dive in the pool, it's like $300 instead of $1,000.
Yeah. And then that it's whatever that system is, the cloud, because really it just is the cloud. And all you need is that missing consciousness that can, like pull each piece of it and put it together at the time that you want it, which if Google's already damn near, on its way there, and you have to assume that they've been building towards that reality. Agreed. And they had a good ad. I think it was a Google phone was kind of like an ad shitting on the Apple ad. Like,
yes, they've had a bunch of really good ads over the last even 18 months, I would say, but definitely the last 3 months, they've had some tremendous ads that I've seen that are just they're not super slick. They're not super slick ad agency kind of level, kind of talking up marketing. They're talking level marketing. They're not, and not to shit on ad agencies. They love you guys, but it's practical. It's really practical messaging. I don't think it's not trying to build all this esteem. It's just being kind of straightforward and provably accurate in the shit that there's the punches that they throw.
Yeah.
And
given the post-truth, post-fake authenticity era, facts might just be the future of advertising. Look, this is a fact. Here's the proof. Buy this thing because it is factually better than the other thing.
I mean, don't you feel like their logic is on the side of that as a future? Because you've got AIs that are theoretically built on logic. They're reading both the marketing, the dream that's being sown, but then they're also reading the headlines. They're also reading the textbooks. They're also reading the reality, the aggregate of the news, and finding the reality and comparing that to what the marketing is saying, and looking at the product reviews and looking at people's actual experiences. And then it just collapses into facts and just says hey, Mikey, that I know you saw the commercial and you asked me if the new iPhone was right for you. The fact is that that's not. It's a 62% match for all your needs. And the new Google Pixel 9 is a 94% match for all your needs. So I know you got a boner over their new commercial, but shit ain't for you.
Right. But until you find out, sponsored by Google, right? That's
yeah.
So, hopefully it remains. The one benefit is the Wild West is everyone competing against each other means at least you can know that which your bias is coming from. Because, if it's well, you should wait for the OpenAI phone. It's okay, ChatGPT, thanks a lot. I'll wait,
I know, but I think don't you think the ship of objectivity sailed long ago? I think by the time the printing press came out, objectivity is relative to your source, because it's, if you ever had enough money to print that fucking book, doesn't make it true. And then, in the age of Google, in the age of SEO and pay-per-click optimization, which has been our reality since, let's say, 1999, is search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is the truth according to whatever the fuck I say the truth is.
Right.
Is what SEO means.
Well, because you can find it. It's the truth. It's whatever you found first is now the truth, basically.
Whatever you found first or whatever you found most relevant or most authoritative. But that all depends on the levers and the weights that you're giving to authority and to truth and all that. And so I think probably even predate the loss of objectivity, probably predates the printing press. It probably predates the first mass civilization. Probably by the time we moved out of the cave of individual family units, objectivity was lost.
It's fair. Yeah, because it's I'm looking for the best phone. I only want the phone because they told me I need the phone. So now I'm doing research, I'm doing research on the thing that I'm told that I want, which I actually don't fucking want. I just want to go outside. But apparently I want this phone, and I'm spending hours researching it. I don't fucking.
Wouldn't it be nice though? And I know we probably got to scoot soon. We've been doing it for a while,
yeah,
but
it's a good one though.
What if, just talking about incentives, hopefully we get the core operating system right. Hopefully we get the regulations right. Let's just say we do. Like, imagine the robot shows up, walks up to the house one day, rings the doorbell and says, Mikey, today's the day. You and I, forever. And imagine it's not $1,000 a month. Imagine that you pay based on metrics that you create with the company. And the company says, Mikey, do you think you'd be a good candidate for a robot? Do you think you'd be interested in that? Do you think it could add a lot to your life? And you're like, well, I don't know. They're like, well, what's missing? Do you wish you could spend more time outside? Do you wish you could spend more time with your family? Do you wish your health was better? Do you wish that you could run like you could when you were 20? Give me your top 1,000 hopes and dreams. And you give it to it. And it's like, hey, we built 100 metrics and we're going to review those metrics now in this 60-minute call. And you go through all those metrics and you're like, fuck yeah. You just basically told me what's important to me in my life. And they're like, well, I'm glad you think so, because we're going to make money based on how much we move these metrics. We valued your health at this. And if we improve your health, we're going to do, a testing kit. The robot's going to measure your biometrics every week, every month. We're going to send out a testing kit. The robot will help pull, whatever, like 4 deciliters of blood or whatever the fuck out of you and send it back to the thing. And, if we improve all your health markers, then we get $1,000. And you're like, fucking deal. And they're like, okay, that's one of 100 ways we get paid. And you go through them and you're like, okay, well, I need to cap the cost of this robot at $2,500 a year or $2,500 a month or whatever the fuck it is. And it's like, okay, that's cool. We're going to optimize for you're like, I love all these 100 things. I only really care about health, spending time with my family, and getting outside more. And they're like, cool, that's all we're going to care about too. And you only have $2,500, so we need to kind of have like 3 goals, not 100. And then the robot's just optimized around that. All it's focused on is getting you healthier, taking care of your chores, and then telling you to go visit your mom, and doing this shit for you at home, writing this report for you so you can go surfing and get outside. And like, I think that if the incentives around AI, and especially as we get into AGI, and especially as that merges with robotics, I think if their payment structure, if we can use capitalism to our advantage, it's going to be in these ways to incentivize our health, our well-being, and our human experience.
Fair. Mic drop. It'd have to be like a design win-win systems instead of give and take. Like, you want this, give me that. And that's what it's like, bartering. Instead of being like, I'm going to invest in you, you invest in me, kind of,
Yeah, I think it has the power. I think it has the power to do that. I really do. I mean, I think it has the chance to have the power to do that. As like hard as that sort of is to like wrap your arms around, that kind of system could actually work. I think AI and AI enabled robotics do actually have the power to, let's not call it a utopia, but like be able to be a product that really can fulfill something that deep.
Well, I think it would take a company that was in that decided to build the premise, like Google had Don't Be Evil, and I think they blew past that at some point. But like a tech company to build that premise, like B Corp style, like our business, it's not even just a fucking plaque on our wall that says do a good job. It's actually, the business model is designed so that you actually can't do it any other way. Like from the ground up, the way we make money is through the investment, and perhaps as an owner of the product, you become a shareholder or something, which again could get sketchy, but who knows? So some way it's designed so that it's still in this free market system. But our company is based on the idea that when you buy one of our products, you're investing in the product, and we are monetarily incentivized to keep you alive and happy versus, and then that's where it's like, gets complicated, right? Because you being happy means you want McDonald's. It's like, okay, well, I gave you McDonald's. You happy now?
You're like, hey, I love all 100 of those goals. Let's focus on McDonald's and hand jobs.
Yeah. Your job is to make me happy, clown. So it's got to have a degree of wisdom, perhaps. And then the person investing in that would have to have the same wisdom to say, okay, I understand that what I'm investing in is this product that is designed to make me long-term happy, to circle back to that, versus short-term, cheeseburgers.
Well, and I mean, if it's properly incentivized and it has a long view, it's not looking for 1 month of $2,500. It's looking for your entire lifetime of whatever you can afford, right? And so,
right,
I think in some ways, I think if the product is really good, that it actually, as a for-profit company, it actually totally benefits them, right? To have you live the longest life possible, have you lived the happiest life possible, because then you're going to add things to its list and therefore add incentives to its pay structure. So it's, if it's proper, with great power comes great responsibility. But I do think that like properly built and properly incentivized and with none of those terrible characteristics of human nature, and if we can like build that out of it, or system prompt that out of it, or like at its core, like we were saying, kind of that that core logic at the middle of it is something that we agree is ultimately pro-human and is something like the Hippocratic Oath, if you're familiar with that, the do no harm.
Yes.
If it has something like that at the core of it, and then you can, I think if the product is good enough, you can let capitalism loose on it, because it's going to want you to live for a long time. It's going to want you to use more of its features. It's going to, the more of you that is here, the better off it is. And the longer you live and the more you give it and the more so I think, and then they're like, if Mikey lives until he's 120 and we help him optimize every part of his life, this robot might earn $14 million lifetime.
Yeah,
right?
I think it would have to be, it's like the Kickstarter model. Like you would have to take out any ability to be incentivized by advertisers or marketers or partnerships that don't directly benefit the person. If you're like, basically, this thing is free. We are NPR. We operate on donations only. We're the only tech company that operates on donations, which means we're not incentivized. We don't take money from partnerships, so it's not to our benefit to use you as a sales funnel, basically. And therefore, and I don't know that that's realistic, but
well, look, I mean, you could probably attach it to a related marker. Just take, for example, let's say they all come as stock. You cannot turn off its desire to give you a longer, healthier life. That's just built into every single one. What that means by relation is that it doesn't want you to needlessly spend money. It doesn't want you to buy things you don't need, because it knows that it makes you more depressed, less capable, and distracted from your primary goals in life. And so, I mean, I think that again, it comes down to the hard coding and it comes down to the objective. But the reality is that if it's concentrated, at least primarily, and then you can add goals onto it by giving you a longer, healthier life, it is going to steer you away from that stuff. And the incentive of serving you up a 15-cent ad to buy a $4 bag of chips, it's like, why would I take the 15 cents when I know that's going to take 2 years off of Mikey's life? And in those 2 years, I'm going to generate on average $50,000 a year. Why would I take the 15 cents in trade for 50 grand? That's insane. And then why would I get him to buy the bag of chips for $4, taking $4 out of his account and putting it in someone else's instead of mine, and then eating chips that are going to take another 8 years off of his life? I'm just not going to do it. Not going to do it. Wouldn't do it. Wouldn't be prudent.
So you build the company based off of compound interest of being alive and long-term thinking. It's like, instead of short-term wins, this company is built off the long-term thinking livelihood of my client being the human.
I mean, I really do think that with the right logic and the right people behind it, it can both be very profitable, but also transformative for humanity, right? I mean, I really do think that. I mean, it might be a narrow set of the possible outcomes, right? But there's a couple of lanes in the many lanes of how this thing could go, where it's, properly incentivized and properly tailored and properly narrowed and properly core coded to do really powerful, amazing things for people.
Interesting. Okay, man, we did it today.
We did all of it.
I think we saved the world. We figured out most of the problems with society.
Yeah. I
think it's a good one.
Sure is. It sure is. But yeah, man, I always love these conversations. And I think I have a lot of faith that conversations of this gravity and at this latitude are happening so much right now and are going to continue to happen so much. And, I hope that starts to make its way into dinners with politicians and whatever, and people start to get it, and we do start to take the steps to the better outcome.